Hi, I'm sending you a little film because I didn't want Arpina to be on her own for this meeting. I think she's been on her own quite enough in this process so far. Where have we got to? After meeting her a short while ago and listening to very short snippet of her music and talking to her about some of her passions, I have, for practicality's sake, taken a project that I had been hoping to work on at some point and sort of manipulated it so that it works with some of Arpina's interests, appeals to her interests in the epic in opera, but that also allows me to work in a kind of contemporary way on a project that I've been wanting to do for a while. So Arpina had come up with an idea in her last collaboration that it would involve three characters, being that there is three instruments. And so I took that as a seed and had a look into a project that I have been hoping to do for a while, that's based on the artist J.S. Lowry, a British artist, part of the naive movement, was born 1890s, died 76, and whose work is very, very British, very, very working class, but one of the greats of our time, so many think. So I'm just going to do something really flash and show you some pictures of some of Lowry's work. There's one, there's another. So he's famed for what everybody calls his matchstick men, street scenes in Salford. He was painting between the 30s and 70s, right up until he died. But the interesting thing for me is that he was always referred to as a Sunday artist. He maintained his job as a rent collector throughout his career and was at first not really taken terribly seriously by the art crowd. I had last summer had a conversation with somebody about a dream project, really, of making artworks move. What would it be to make a large-scale Lowry that involved hundreds of people in a civic space? And so, on meeting Arpina, I thought, well, here's something that's quite epic, but at the same time it has a kind of seedy working class thing that really appeals to my nature and my interests. And so I did a bit of research into him, and then it was one of those sort of lucky happenstances that I discovered that there were three characters in Lowry's life, three women. He had always been seen as asexual, as not interested in having a relationship with a woman, and people found that very peculiar. Saw him as a bit of a hermit, I suppose. But there had been three very important female figures in his life. Firstly, his incredibly domineering mother, very working class woman who was not at all happy about the idea of her son becoming an artist, probably partly responsible for him keeping his job as a rent collector. She had quite a degree of control on his happiness, I suppose. When his father had died and she became ill, she insisted that Lowry return to live with her, which he did for 7 years, was at her beck and call pretty much 24 hours a day. Despite her monstrosity, she was quite hard on him. And he stayed with her for those 7 years and continued to paint, continued to make work, and by that time was starting to be really recognised by not just the British art scene but the art scene worldwide. So there is the first of our characters, and I suppose for me she instantly was aligned with the cello. Her movement will be really earthy in the pelvis, really deep. I think for some reason that she will make sound, that she will be quite fierce and quite barky in both her movement material and the sounds that she emulates throughout the piece. And then the next figure, I suppose, in his life is another of his peculiarities, in that he met in the 40s, I think, a young girl who was his namesake, Carol Lowry, she was 13 at the time, and he sort of took her under her wing, and I suppose tried to give her the opportunities that hadn't been allowed to him. He really encouraged her towards art making, creativity. He eventually paid for her to go to art school, and she's now living in New York and is an artist. He also left his entire collection and all his monetary worth to her, which included a key to a safe that hadn't been opened for a very long time, and that was at one part of Larry's life that she had not been exposed to. He hadn't let her see while he was alive. And when she opened it, she discovered that there were a whole series of drawings, 100 drawings of Coppelia. And as a child, she'd been taken by Larry to see Coppelia a number of times, and had thought that it was her treat, that it was something he was doing for her to broaden her horizons, to introduce her to other ways of thinking about artistry and creativity. And yet when she opened this safe, she discovered that the drawings were of Coppelia and were really quite starkly different to the work that we know of Larry. And so she, I suppose, is the third character. And so here she is. And these drawings intrigue me because it was sort of known of Larry that he didn't have a particularly high opinion of what was happening in the 60s and 70s, so very late in his life, just before he died, with women's fashion. He was known to talk about the short skirts and the knee-length boots as being constricting, and there's something that he kind of encouraged Carol Lowry away from. And so Coppelia, this character Coppelia, really intrigues me because she's sort of Larry's secret woman, and I think the question that I want to ask, the question of the piece, is what do these drawings say about what Larry really felt about women? Is this his observation of how society treats women, or is the fact that they were hidden indicative of how Larry felt about women? Is this how he saw women, or is this how he thought society saw women? So that kind of intrigues me. So on meeting Arpina on Saturday, we had a look at these photos, and I discussed with her how we might bring this to the stage, and how perhaps there could be an element of the Larry that we know, and then these hidden characters, and that these characters appear as vignettes, and in the music they have themes that sometimes are in their introduction just the cello introducing this mother, but then the play between those becomes more complex as the piece progresses. And one thing I am considering doing, but that might not stay, is situating these three characters in the Larry that we know, i.e. having a number of performers on stage. The original idea for the project was to do it as a big community piece where there were quite a number of dancers in an industrial looking space, appearing as the Matchstick Men and moving so very, very slowly over a long period of time that you barely notice them until they're gone. And so we are considering how relevant that be, how interesting that might be, what it might be like to put the audience in amongst that, so that they have to look for these little vignettes that are popping up in the mother, in Carol. So we may or may not have a group of dancers on stage who seem to obscure some of the material, but whom you hopefully barely notice, moving very, very slowly, so that at the very end there is the reveal of Coppelia. I think that's going to be the challenge, is how we deal with that without it being really demonstrative. Because for me, Coppelia is this fictional character in Larry's life, and given that she's pencil sketches, there's something that kind of becomes a bit more performance arty and less dancey, in that I don't think we want to tell the nice tidy story of of Larry and his three women, but want to ask the question, God, what does this mean? What were Larry's three women? Coppelia as this small reveal at the end. You barely see her, and somehow you know that this is not real. I don't know yet whether it's about the way that we adorn her with paper, or that she is like a sketch and perhaps just has a little colour under the paper that she wears. We're not yet sure how we're going to deal with that. But at the moment are working on the idea that amidst this slow-moving crowd, are these quite dominant figures. One who takes on the cello in the pelvis, one who has low movement and possibly even sound that she barks, that this woman is a larger-than-life character. And then Carol, who flits between the crowd, who you never quite know, is she a child, is she an adult, that she is the sort of through line, she's the one that takes us through this story. And then this final shock reveal of something entirely different. So musically Arpina is working on having these themes that run throughout the piece, that are sometimes harmonious and sometimes very disconnected from each other, and then this very new idea that comes in at the end. So we sort of leave the piece with a question rather than trying to be tidy about it. So that's where we are. I hope this has been useful for Arpina, and I'm sorry to leave her on her own. And I hope today's meeting goes well. Okay, see you soon.